Tonight is the Transportation Advisory Committee's meeting on October 10th at 7:30 p.m. Thanks everybody for being here so promptly. We are here without Aaron tonight, so I'm going to be recording and I might get distracted by people coming into the waiting room. Steve, if you could help let people in, if we have folks from the public join us throughout the meeting, that would be really helpful. I will call everybody in here. So we've got Nick Papas, Mark Gale, I think we should unmute.
Yeah, Nick here.
Mark Galis.
I lost the window for a second. I'm here. Thanks.
Okay, great. This also serves as a good tech check as well. Mariana Hill.
Present.
Dan Schrager.
Here.
And Phil Posner.
I'm here.
And I'm here too, Laura Davis. And okay, so our first order of business is to review and approve minutes. Dan very kindly sent me the meeting minutes from September 12th earlier today, but I did not get a chance to send them out to everybody because we had the survey to get out to everybody, and I wanted to prioritize that. So we will approve those meeting minutes at our next meeting. I'll make sure that they go out and they get posted so that everybody can review them before I believe our next meeting is on, our next regular meeting is on October 24th. We are going to see each other every week for a month, which is great. Thanks, Dan, for doing those minutes.
Sorry they were late.
No, they were great. We didn't give you very much time because this is a special meeting, remember? We didn't have our 3 weeks in between. Who will take notes tonight? And I want to ask if anybody can take notes in real time so that we can share the meeting minutes immediately after this meeting. Since we're going to be taking most of our notes in a meeting, like in a document to send to Stantec. So I don't think they'll be very complicated. And I think it would just be good to have them posted right away, if that's possible. And the draft minutes, we'd have to approve them at our next meeting. Anybody good at multitasking?
Whose turn is it? Well, actually, Mariana's turn. She's new.
I'll do it.
I'll throw you right in the deep end, Mariana. Thank you so much.
I'm up for it.
And Mariana, just to review what we've talked about at some previous meetings about our meeting minutes, they do not have to be a detailed transcript of everything said in this meeting. It's just what is discussed, what's the process, any highlights of the discussion, and any votes taken. So it does not have to be complicated. And like I said, I think most of our discussion will be captured in a meeting document tonight. So I don't think that it'll be a heavy lift. All right. Any questions about meeting minutes before we move on? Great. So all we're going to discuss tonight is preparing or is working on the comprehensive transportation study. The survey is our first order of business, and then also to talk about the public workshop. First, I want to just thank everybody for very thorough comments on the first draft. I know that the way that first draft came out maybe didn't come out with enough context for folks for that first round of comments. So thanks. I think many people came back and redid their comments or did new comments after our discussion about it last time. And I think that was very helpful. I know Stantec and Aaron both worked on incorporating edits from each of us into this new draft that we were given today, and that's now posted on our website. And there's also edits that came back from engineering, planning, and the public works department. So I just want to remind everybody that there are many voices being sort of incorporated into the survey. So I sent out the second draft at about 4 p.m. tonight. I know that didn't give everybody a ton of time. So I want to ask if everybody had a chance to review that second draft, or if this is going to be the first time folks are seeing it. No judgment either way. You only had a couple of hours.
I did not. It took me a long time to do the first one. I didn't want to jump into this one and get partway through it.
Yeah, I did. I just pulled it up for the first time.
Okay. Well, this will be good because we can go through them together, which was my goal for tonight.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. The other thing I want to say is this is not the final draft. We're here tonight to discuss, to gather more feedback, and to send more comments back to Stantec. So, this is another opportunity for us to be honing in on what we really want to be capturing in this survey. Just to preface this conversation, there may be whole sections that we're like, this section doesn't make any sense. Let's just cut it, or let's move this, or let's transform this. There may be very specific answers that we want to adjust, but I do want to preface this whole conversation by saying that the survey is currently 39 questions long. I'm pointing that out for two reasons. One, you don't have to take my word for it. The Pew Research Center says the longer a survey is, the fewer people are willing to complete it, and they cap the length of their surveys at 15 minutes. So it may be wise for us to consider if there's fat to be trimmed out of this survey. So wanted to point it out for that reason. And then the other thing is that if we debate each of the 39 questions for 2 minutes each, it'll take us 78 minutes to get through the survey. So let's be concise, not repeat each other, listen. And I also want to say, we don't have to come to consensus on feedback for this survey. Perfectly fine for us to write in, 2 people felt this way about this question and 3 people felt a different way, and 1 person had no opinion about it. So just want to kind of like give us that framework for working through the survey together so that we can actually get all the way to the end of it without staying here until 11. Go ahead, Mark.
Since it's 39 questions and some of us haven't looked through it, and we want to give some, good feedback today. One thing I thought was, based on what's the comments that we've already submitted that have been posted, there may be a few consensus items that we could highlight to begin with, and then sort of see if they're in there or not. So one of them is, I think multiple people said there ought to be some completely open-ended questions to kind of let people say what they want. So if that's
I do think it would be valuable for us to go through the survey, because most of the things that we came to consensus on in our comments, since they reviewed all of our comments, most of those things are reflected in the new draft.
Okay. So
but if
why
we
don't you
want to talk, but not to stop the conversation, if we want to talk about some high level things before we dive in, I think that's valuable. But I know that they added at least one open-ended question on there. Okay. So
well, I'll just very quickly, I just say that high level, I would say open-ended question, how weather affects modes that people use. I think, my feeling is that if there was a goal to try to get to, in the first draft, to understand people's economic situation, it'd be more valuable to say, how concerned are you about what transportation costs you? And another question would be about how concerned, are you about availability of transportation? And one last thing I would mention is that we'll see how it is in the 39 questions, but school transportation seems to be so complicated that a separate school transportation survey might really help us get something more useful. I don't know what people think, but just throwing those thoughts out.
Any other high level thoughts before we dive in? I do think that we can capture each of those things as we get to those different questions, Mark, because I think some of those things I do agree with, but I think we'll have to kind of take them in turn so we can create something that's usable.
I agree with Mark on the school thing. I'm not sure the school questions belong in this. I think Fair. It should be a separate survey.
All right. Well, let's dive in here.
I guess a high level question. I'm not sure. There's something I brought up before that I don't think is addressed, which is this survey is just for people who are here now, so it's not going to pick up anything about low income people who aren't present in town particularly today, or the people at the Best Western. Are they part of this? I just don't get it. I mean, the town has a direction it's heading in, and I'm not sure how this survey deals with where we're headed as opposed to where we are.
I think that's a really good point, Mark. I do want to just remind that part of the scope with Stantec does involve focus groups, does involve other ways to reach out. I think that a survey can't do everything all at once, but if there are opportunities for us to build that into this survey, I think that's really valuable. I think that clearly from the way that the survey is written, it's best going to serve people who live and work in Concord. And I think that figuring out how to engage in a non-transactional way, folks that live at the Best Western, I think that there are going to be ways that we need to be creative about getting information.
This is one of the main problems I have in criticizing the survey, which is that I don't know what other ways they're going to be collecting data. So it's hard to say what's missing from this survey if the answer is always going to be, oh, they're going to get that some other way. Which ones are they getting some other way? So I'm just not clear what the scope of this is supposed to be and what's intentionally being left out. And I'll just leave it at that. Okay. So that makes it a little hard to critique specific questions, because sometimes the answer is, oh, they're going to get that some other way.
Can I make a recommendation and say that at the end, when we get to the end of the survey, we write, these are the limitations that we see with the survey. This is the information that we feel it does not adequately capture. Given that a survey can't do everything, we want to make sure that Stantec knows that we find these areas to be lacking, and we want to make sure that we're building into our engagement plan other ways to collect that information. A survey to the school is a great example. A way to talk to leading housing advocates, in other communities that represent the interests of people who might want to be moving here. Yeah, I think that we have to be creative about how we get some of that information, but I think that we can absolutely offer that as feedback. Does that satisfy some of what you're trying to get at, Nick?
Well, I think you should. It's hard to tell. I mean, I guess my response is I already said a bunch of that in my original comments, and it would be nice for them to comment on that and to answer those questions that I brought up in the original comments instead of me putting them on the table again. Okay, so they're there.
Well, Laura, where is this thing going to be? How's it going to be disseminated? Who's going to be filling this out?
Steve, feel free to jump in here at any point, because as the staff person on the call, you might have more information. My understanding thus far is that it's going to be available on the town website. Obviously, that only gets to a certain demographic. It's going to be hopefully finished and available at the meeting on Tuesday. There will be postcards so people can take them home and with a QR code and say, so-and-so, please fill this out. And then I would say it's incumbent upon each of us to make sure that this survey ends up in the hands of as many people as possible. And so I think that, and I believe there's also, Erin has been working on whether we can get postcards to send to every residence in Concord. And I think that we can also talk at our next meeting. We'll have a meeting right after the 17th, so we can discuss, the survey is going to be open for a while, so we can discuss other ways that we want to make sure it gets out.
Okay. Is there going to be a way of assuring that people don't answer it multiple times?
They are building some things into this related to IP addresses, but that's over my head. Maybe Steve has better answers to that.
I don't have the answer for that, but we can find out. One other thing I just wanted to add regarding Nick's concern about, for future populations, I think that's probably going to be addressed during Stantec's analysis of the information. It's just like development. You have to plan based on development trends. So in the same way, you have to plan on what is the town want to do regarding a diversified population, a workforce population, that kind of thing. I think those things will be brought into the calculations. That's my hope. These are the things that we're going to continue to ask Stantec and try to understand exactly how they're going to do the analysis and put together a report for us.
All right, Mark, and then I really do want to get to this because I want to make sure that we get through the questions.
Yeah.
Mark.
Very quick. I was just going to say, so Stephen, are you saying, for instance, Nick could focus his question, send it to you and say, please give this to Stantec so that be sure they include that perspective?
Oh, Steve,
You're
you're
muted.
muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's correct. And we already have Nick's comments from his earlier comment.
Okay. All right, Laura, I just wanted to say in terms of what's on the screen, going quickly through it, I think the $25 gift card is a waste of time, but that's my opinion. I also think that depending if the survey is only going to come out on October 17th, what it ought to say instead of we hope to see you on October 17th is something like check this website for the latest outreach events or something.
Thank you for getting us started here. I'm going to write while people talk. So I think that that's a good point. So I may need some help co-facilitating as we go through here. But any other comments on this opening piece that should be captured?
Yes, I always feel left out in these questions because they never include retired people. And there are a lot of retired people in Concord. You know, it asks if you work here, if you do this, if you do that. But I never know how to fill these out because I'm retired.
Other.
So
You do live in Concord though, Nick. That
I
is,
know, but it asks if I work in Concord, and I live in Concord, yes, but I'm a retired person. I think that's relevant. It indicates something about my age and, you know, whatever. That's all.
And inclusivity.
So
Um,
I have a question before we move on. This is at the beginning. What does it mean to develop specific Concord design standards? What does that mean?
Steve, you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is in regard to, let me give an example. So the Complete Streets list of projects. You know, Stantec's current scope of work, they can't look at every project, but they can look at the kinds of projects we have. For instance, we may have sidewalk projects, crosswalk projects, certain road improvement projects. So in order for the town to address that list, if they're planning to, you know, redo the prioritization, or even new projects that's coming to our attention, what Stantec is going to do, they're going to give us criteria that we would have to look at. Say, for instance, you know, the counts of pedestrians, counts for bicycles or even motor vehicles, speeds, and so on. And we'll use those criteria to determine, you know, how important this project is, and to rank it and set up our own priorities for projects in the future. That's just one example. But that's
Okay.
the kind of thing that we expect under this design criteria.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
can I add
that
to
makes sense to me. I'm sorry, let me just spit that out. And maybe it should say something closer to, you know, setting priorities as opposed to design standards, which I'll just leave it at that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Maria.
You know, I think design standards is also sort of like, how wide is the crosswalk? What color is the bike lane? You know, how are we designing the signs and the lighting, and in a way that, you know, is consistent across town, as well as consistent with, you know, the state Complete Streets guidelines.
And
If you added the word engineering design standards, I think it makes it clearer to the public what you're talking about. If you just stuck the word engineering before, yeah.
I wonder about the, it might be better to say Concord specific, hyphenated, because, for instance, people for historic reasons might want not want green bike lanes. They might want something else, or, you know,
Right,
does that make sense to people?
sure.
It makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Because what you're suggesting is that Concord do something.
I think this is a
That is-
valuable discussion for another day.
All right, so
I do think,
we'll leave it alone.
I think that this part, I think that the scope of our work here, we wrote the RFP, like there's been many discussions about this particular section, and it is 7:50. So I do want to keep us moving. But we can discuss whether that's a valuable thing to have another day. I know that there were some recommendations for some that this first opening section get broken up into a little bit more of a binary. Do you live in Concord? Yes, no. Do you work in Concord? Yes, no. This was the comment from our Stantec team. They liked that we're starting with sort of inclusive, welcoming answers that sort of welcome people who may not live in Concord, maybe just work in Concord, maybe just have their children attend school in Concord. Just wanted to ask how others felt about that, since that was kind of an open question here.
Like the binary one, it's clear. The answers, interpreting the answers seem cleaner if it's binary.
Other thoughts there?
I'd agree with Nick on that.
Any opposing views on that?
Yeah,
I have to drop off for 1 minute, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that would get to people who are coming into town to do the other things that are mentioned here, going to school, has a child in school, shopping, etc. Because I think we want to try to capture some information from people who aren't just living or working here, but are in some other way doing business or, you know, involved in commerce here.
How about some preference for binary yes, no questions, as long as we were able to retain the other possible identities that people have?
Yeah. Sure.
These are binary questions.
Yes.
And they cover the gamut pretty well.
Yeah, the select all that apply is nice.
Oh, all that apply. That's kind of a nice idea.
I think that's also easier, like that, it's when you're going through this and people don't have all night to respond, then they don't have to read the questions as carefully. They can just check what jumps out as being relevant to them.
Oh, I see. You were responding to select all that apply here.
So that those are like check boxes on the online form.
Does anybody have particularly strong views on this? Or are we kind of okay with this? Okay, let's keep going then. I'm just going to leave it as is then. Except for include retired as an option. Because if the goal of this question is to be inclusive, I think that that's a really good point.
Then it should go under the second bullet point. I work from home, I am retired, I own a business, whatever. There you go.
Okay, moving on. Travel habits. So we have here, and I just want to pull up, this was the mock-up. This is sort of the mock-up of what this would look like in practice, because the matrices are kind of hard to see on a Word document. My comment here is I don't find these headings to be particularly useful. I think they're very general. I would be more interested in knowing frequency for the different modes than I would be destinations, since I think these destinations are a little squirrely for people. But I'd be interested to know what others think of that.
I agree with that. I think in general, I think some sense of how much, you know, percentages or something like that is a lot more useful than just saying, yeah, I walk, I do them all. What did I learn? What did we learn from that? Nothing.
I agree that it seems very squirrely to me. I can't, and some of them are two different. They're double columns, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So yeah, and frequency would be a good thing because, you know, is it you ever do this or you do this every day?
Yes, there is a great model. So I actually did a lot of comparisons between this survey and the National Transportation Survey, National Household Transportation Survey. And they do have a really good model for this for like, every daily, few times a week.
Right, that's good.
That I think that would be a very useful.
That's a
framework.
lot better. That's a lot better. Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
And then my recommendation on this next point is to mirror that exactly. Have the same thing. Are you walking every day in Concord? A lot of dog walkers will say daily. Rollerblading, and maybe we could have seasonally in there as an option.
Rarely.
Rarely, yeah, that kind of covers it, I suppose.
Again, I think the consistency in formatting those makes it easier to process and easier to get faster, more accurate information from people.
Okay.
I'm
gonna-
it's good to have questions that sort of, cross each other and give you, I think, like the first number 2 and number 3 kind of together give you much more information than just one or the other. So I think that's good, but they kind of overlap in a certain way. There is that, what Mariana is saying about consistency in the questions, both helps people understand, fill it out quicker, but we have to be careful that if suddenly the paradigm shifts, which might be helpful to keep people interested, that it isn't misleading somehow. You know what I mean? It's like, which do not do versus what
Right,
you
you
do,
switch
or
it.
things like that.
Yeah. But you
All
want to
right.
have people write in, write in your destination of where do you walk and bike to. I know that makes it harder for the data analysis processing end, but maybe leaves it more open-ended.
I do think that there may be opportunities to do that on the map. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to get a sense of where people are walking based on where they see issues and opportunities. Because they're going to notice those things on the places where they're walking or biking.
In the physical format online, if sometimes the other boxes are way too small for people to feel comfortable. So I don't know if there's a way to put a comment about that. In other words, when you say other, do you want one word response or do you want multiple things? Just something to think about. I don't know.
Yeah, this is where I think percentages or some sense of weighting is important, and just having a checkbox doesn't do it for me. It doesn't give me much information. It just causes me to ask more questions.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Nick?
Yeah, this also applies to number 4. If somebody just says, yeah, the 2 ways I get my kid to high school are sometimes it takes the bus and sometimes I drive him. Well, do you drive them once a year? Do you drive them 5 times a month? You need to have some relative sense of how much it happens. Otherwise, I don't think it's very useful information.
Does this address, this is the National Transportation Survey. So this is how they ask a similar question.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. That's a good way of doing it. I think that achieves the same thing.
Do we like this? Should I put this in as we recommend these options?
I like something like that better. For the school thing, I would definitely want to ask that question twice about what do you do in the middle of a January snow event or whatever. So, it could, again, the school thing could be separate, but how do you typically travel between home and school, in good weather or in really bad weather? I think it's different for people.
Well, you're raising a question there, which is, well, why do you sometimes drive? Right? So they drive 10% of the time, but why? Is it the weather? Is it doctor appointments? What is it?
Sorry to make it complicated.
Well, here's a question I have. So are we happy with this, these 2, before we move on to the school? Because I think we should talk about school separately. Are we happy with asking to change this to frequencies with these categories for these?
That improves it. Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
Yes.
My question with the school is this. I agree. We're not going to get all of the information about school travel in this survey. There is so much. I've done a school survey just for the high school. It was a long survey and it was really helpful. I'm also happy to share that, put it up on our, it's old now. It's early 2020, pre-pandemic 2020. but it does give a really good sense of how often people drive their children to school, what are the barriers that they see. Carrying heavy bags came up as like a huge barrier, and I was like, we just need a workshop on panniers, apparently. So I think that there's a whole set of questions I would love to ask to school parents, but my question is, should we have one question on here just so that we get a sense of it, and then we can have a little bit more information, so we'll be able to dive into that question more deeply if we're working with the school district?
Well, I guess the question is, why are we asking about school at all?
Right.
And to me, the thing that's always jumped out at me is how much people drive their kids to school as opposed to using the school bus, right? And that's something, if I were only going to ask one question, it would probably be something about that. But I don't know what. Okay. But I'm sort of I think you're right. Really collecting good data on this topic, given that there's a transportation system for school kids, is potentially very complicated, and the reasons people do things are very different. So I'd rather go with a very simple question that gives us some good data than trying to capture it all.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's fine to have one question in there, but kind of fine tune it a little. First of all, it says the first bullet doesn't make sense because it says if you are a caregiver. So the first bullet goes, I would, when we say top two modes, okay, in terms of frequency, top two is one thing. You could say most frequently pick up to 3, and some people might pick just 1 because that is the one they use, and some people might pick 3 because they're split, and that gives you a certain distribution of information. I'm trying to crowd meaning into one question, you know what I mean? So, pick which do you, if the question says which do you use most frequently, and pick up to 3, then that would allow for cases where you have multiple kids using different modes and you use them frequently for them. It also allows somebody to pick 1. Do you know what I mean? Like, what if you only use 1 and so just a thought.
Yeah,
I'm just going to switch this view to this one and see if we can see it here, just so that we have a better sense of what it looks like when we see it here. Oops, sorry. Personally, I find the verbiage the most problematic here. Like, we need walk, but like we needed to look like this one: walk, bike, drive alone, drive carpool, basically get all of these things down into the most simple version.
I agree. Fewer words, if it's clear, as clear or clearer is better.
So I would just say, so the way that I look at this is, and as a parent, I know that if you have a child in the middle school and a child in daycare or pre-K, which I would say daycare should be daycare / pre-K here. Your middle schooler may bike to school most days or ride the bus, and then you're driving your preschooler to school every day. So I do like that you can choose different modes for different schools. But my question is, do we think that this is going to be, will people understand this? Does everybody here understand how one would fill this out? And how
there are too many irrelevant answers. I mean, I don't care for children. Why do you have all the schools listed across? My child drives to school. Pre-K, elementary, and middle school don't.
Well, the first question goes away, because if the primary question at the top is said, if you are a caregiver, you don't need that line. So that helps.
Well, let's take this out. Yeah. And we want to say, walk. Whoops. We want to say walk, rides, or bike, scooter, school bus.
I think school bus should be at the top.
Drive alone. Yeah.
I think school bus should be at the top also. I mean, it's the town pays for it. It's available to everybody.
A lot of kids take it.
Yeah. I also mentioned in my comments that I think bike and scooter should be different, because scooters you know, I mean, I haven't ridden a scooter in a long time, but you can go over certain surfaces on a bike that you can't with a scooter. So looking at transportation infrastructure, if we're trying to create transportation infrastructure for scooters, I'm not sure how that ups the ante. A lot of sidewalks won't work for a scooter when they would work fine for a bike, for example.
How do we
We are
like
trying,
say,
we are
sorry, go
trying to
ahead, Dan.
simplify this thing, and I feel like we're getting too into the weeds.
Do we like this option here?
Which one?
I've simplified a list up here because I was going to try to do this and I
School
realized
bus, walk, drive alone, drive. I don't know what drive alone means. It means the child drives alone, or you drive
Yeah.
one child, or
um,
drive or is driven, or drive is driven. I don't know what you want to say.
this
And
is how we ended up with these very long sentences down here. Because it does require a little bit of mental
Well,
effort.
what do we want to get out of the drive part? Because there's multiple things. They could drive themselves alone. They could be driven by a parent or someone else. They could drive in a carpool, or they could be driven in a carpool. And what do we want out of that? Do we just want to know if a car is involved, or do we want to know if it's I mean,
We could say personal vehicle. And we could say carpool.
yeah, that I think, yeah, personal vehicle, and yeah, I think that's personal vehicle.
But you're
Yeah,
contracting.
maybe put in parentheses car, just because people, I mean, a bicycle is a personal vehicle.
Who's driving though? Is it the parent or the child?
What do you guys think?
Difference does it make to us?
Well, I don't even know why
otherwise
it's in
becomes
here.
Parking, which is.
Well, this is why, okay, this is where if we kind of agree that it might make sense to do a school intensive survey separately at some point by some,
Yeah.
either this consultant or somebody or the school district, then, you know, we can make this simple.
And I would say, going back to the original question, what are we trying to get out of this? We're trying to understand generally some travel habits. It will be very valuable for us to have the information. 90% of families are using a personal vehicle to take their children to school. Okay, we have that information. Now we can design a survey to understand why that is. You know, why is it more middle school students than elementary school students? Like we're going to get a little bit of information that could help us form questions that we can answer later. Does that feel like we're getting at that initial layer of
I think
detail?
it helps to know how many people use school bus, walk, and these others. So I think it's useful. I would just wonder if instead of vehicle, we should put automobile or something. I don't know what people think, because again, vehicle, to us, it means something. Yeah, good. That's fine.
Do we want to say this?
So Laura, to that point, would we not want to go into, hey, on the days you drive your kid to school, why, right? Is it because of or is that more something we would follow up with more specifically in the future? Like, is it after school activities? Is it sports? Is it the bus schedule?
Right.
That's a good point, and it's even more complicated. So that's good for the future. Good note.
I would say if this survey came back and I just was able to get the distinction between roughly how many people use the school bus, how many people drive their kids, and how many people either bike or walk, which to my mind is a similar thing, then we've got some really good high-level data that might be pretty good, okay? And getting more detailed than that, or it's just, I think is a distraction. So in my mind, the three categories are school bus, walk bike, or family car.
We use the schools use walk, bike, and roll as a term, so that might be
fine.
a useful way of categorizing it.
I don't like that at all, because to me, role is like a totally different category. But
It
anyway.
seeks to be inclusive of people who use wheelchairs. That's the reason.
Well, I would just say that if we interpret it, well, I can walk across a grassy field and I can't skate across it. So I just you know, caution, if you try to use this for something, it basically is a negative category. It's not a school bus, it's not a car, but it doesn't define much in terms of transportation surfaces or infrastructure.
It's self-propelled. I don't know how else to say it. It's basically you're going on your own energy, your own,
Yeah,
you know.
I've said enough.
Well,
That's what
I'm
it
just
is.
going to go back to this. Can we, is this, I mean, we could try to simplify it more, but is this okay? Is this good enough?
So
With reservations.
I would
it's
take
okay.
out the bottom three. I would just leave the top four.
Well, the
Cut out-
bottom one, duplicative.
I would take, what public transit? We don't have any.
There are
It's okay.
there are students who use the commuter rail to go to schools in other communities. I do know families who use the commuter rail for their children's.
And there are kids who come to CA that way too, but you know, we're talking about a small number. And if we leave them out, it's not. This isn't an exercise of inclusion and making sure everybody feels okay because they got a category. We're just trying to get, you know,
other includes that, I think.
huh?
I think other includes that, fine.
Yeah.
That's
As long
true.
as there's
Other-
an other.
Laura, you should take out the My Child Rides biker scooter because it's already biker scooter up
Oh,
above.
these are all going away.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good. Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. And I'll clean up these comments so so it's very clear that this is our new recommendation. Okay.
Five
So-
is a great question. I just would like a little bit more information.
Yeah.
Right. So this
That
is
was
what I
meant to
asked,
be
like,
a yes
what
or
are we
no.
looking for out of this question? What is actionable data that's going to come out of this question? And my question is also, should we be capturing this under the different headings of walking, biking, public transit to assess how weather is affecting modes specifically? Or do we want something general here?
I would accept an essay question here. Just
Right,
ask
'cause
this
it's
question
obviously,
and let
yeah.
them write in.
And then you don't get any information. They just say yes and keep going.
You could make it yes, no, and expand, if you will, or something. I don't know.
How about how do
could.
instead of does?
Or you
Mm.
could also have the same previous list. I don't know.
Do we like this open-ended or do we want multiple choice here? It sounds like those are two options on the table.
Well, if there's so many multiple choices, I don't know. It's just going to be ridiculous. I think just an open-ended question, ask them to explain. That's all.
From what to what?
Yeah. What do you do differently? Want to know.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
This question, which neighborhood do you live or work in Concord and where in town do you go? I could not understand what this question meant or what we were trying to get out of it personally.
It's very confusing. I don't like it.
I think
You
maybe
know.
it's asking for cross streets or general, like what we don't really have specific neighborhoods. I don't think that.
Yeah, different
have
people might
before.
identify their neighborhood a different way, and if we have to prune this, I would prune this and think about what we want to get out of it.
I would, again, if I don't know how Stantec feels about open-ended essay questions. I'm just being silly when I say essay, but a written answer, a sentence or so. But I think what we're trying to get at here is, when do you commonly use a bike or walk around Concord? Just something like that, and just see what we get for answers.
I vote for prune this, just for the 39 question reason.
And we don't have enough time to figure this out. I don't how to make this good.
Well, that's also some of the feedback we're trying to get at next week's meeting, right? Dots on maps.
Could you ask people to share their address?
I do think we have some questions down in the demographic section that's trying to get at location data. And I would focus on getting those questions right rather than trying to figure out what this question is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
Okay.
I would cross it out for now. not easy to fix. Okay, I think how many people thought in an ideal world was absolutely inappropriate contextualization for a survey question?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking either a horse or possibly a unicorn might be you know, if it becomes available, might be my preferred method of transit.
Yeah, I just I think that is the most ridiculous word.
Everyone biking.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
I'd
my
ra-
son would like to have a train that travels the speed of light. That apparently,
Right, exactly.
for a personal
Scenario.
chauffeur.
yeah.
I mean, again, one of the things, I don't know what people think, but to me, one of the things, you know, despite the fact, you know, as was discussed earlier, we want to think, Nick is saying, and Stephen is talking about, we want to think about future needs. I think it's really important to capture in a slightly redundant, you know, way existing patterns. It's because otherwise we really don't know where we're starting and what people know about, what people are familiar with.
Yeah, why do we care about their ideal? I mean, what
No, we don't.
what we want is what Mark just said. We want to know what they're doing, don't we?
So
It sounds to me like everybody wants to cut this section, and I am super on board with cutting this whole section personally.
There's a comment right here. I think that the subsequent question attempts to get in the head of the respondent by seeing which elements separate the world from the ideal world.
the other thing you could do would be to change the whole section into one open-ended question. Do you have any preferences for future mobility, you know, ways of traveling? And just, you know, either you get good ideas or you don't get good ideas, and you put a don't know, they don't have to answer it. So you just turn it totally open-ended instead of trying to make it analytical. You know what I'm saying?
Laura, I've got a family issue I've got to deal with. I've got to drop out for a while.
Okay, we'll miss you, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we have enough people now that we could still have a quorum if somebody needs to leave.
I think one way to rephrase this is like, I don't know, I think what we're getting at here is, what do we need to build? What do we need to change? You know, if we had bike paths throughout town, then would you bike? Right. So that we can get at, you know, what are we trying to do here? And, you know, hear from the people that would say, well, you know what, even if I felt safe and comfortable and it was free, I still wouldn't bike.
Yeah.
I feel like, though, I mean, I don't know, that's the point of the survey, but it's like, sure, wouldn't everyone bike if the world was ideal? So,
Mark, we're not hearing anything you're saying. You're not muted though. Okay, now we hear you.
No, okay. What if we temporarily scratch this, because there's a number of problems, you know, this section, future mobility preferences, question mark. I mean, another thing I mentioned too is that once you contextualize preferred as in an ideal world, then the second part, preferred, actually doesn't mean preferred. It means preferred in an ideal world, which is even more abstract. So I would just put that whole thing on ice for now, unless it's a totally open-ended guy.
I agree with you, Mark. I would put this whole section on ice. And I would also say, if we're trying to get at what Mariana is saying, like, if we build something, if we change something, would you use it? I think that breaking it up by mode makes it so much more digestible for people. Like, would you actually walk if there was an interconnected network of sidewalks all over town that reached every destination that you could possibly want to go to? Like, I'd like to know the answer to that. But I think if in this, it's just like it's not clear what we're asking for. I'd rather have it by mode.
Yeah.
I think they do that in the next couple of questions, right? They go into, why don't you bike? Why don't you walk? Takes too long, you know, sidewalk. And I think in the online format, it's pretty easy to process.
So are we all in agreement that this is a difficult section that might be captured better on in different sections later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And I'm going to put a note in here that says, we all feel that this section should be cut, both for length and clarity. We believe we can capture this information in subsequent sections. Okay. Moving on to walking and rolling in Concord. So how often, this is a pretty straightforward question. We can use this same frequency up above if this is the frequency we're going to use. Daily, several times a week, once a week, a few times a month, rarely, never. Does that feel like a good frequency pattern to be having throughout?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mark, go ahead.
Patterns, okay. I'm a little bit concerned about the wheelchair because there are so many different types of wheelchair. And so I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but there's walking, which is pretty I mean, if you had a place with a lot of stairs, you could walk up with a wheelchair. You can't. If you have sort of a grassy path in a field, you can walk, but not. So anyway, I just want to register that I have a little bit of a. I mean, it's good to include it be inclusive, but I'm wondering if the being inclusive is actually serving the people we're trying to include, because we're not able to parse that out separately. Do you see what I mean? Anyway, that's my comment.
Like the input of wheelchair mobility device users might be best processed in an open-ended sense, since it would be so specific to each user. And I feel like there aren't so many of them that would be overwhelming to synthesize once we get all the results back.
But I think that's a great idea. If have a section that says, if you use a wheelchair or other mobility device, tell us about your transportation use and challenges and whatever we want to hear, or something
those
along
people
that.
have comments that we want to hear.
Yes, definitely.
I wonder if we could even put, I love the idea of sort of ending this section with a question that's like, you know, if you use a wheelchair or personal mobility device, can you tell us some of the unique or the challenges that you feel are unique to wheelchair, you know, to users in your situation around Concord? I know that one of my comments was I thought we should maybe have a whole section for wheelchair users and mobility device users. But you know, that was met with, well, we're not going to get a huge group of people responding to that section of the survey. And so it may be better for, like, that's one of those scenarios where the aggregated data doesn't really matter. Getting the stories of people who actually experience the community that way we're going to want to look at those very closely. So yeah, I think an open-ended question is the perfect way to end this section.
And another the Commission on Disabilities or somebody else could do a targeted survey for that group and get some statistical information. We just make sure there's one open-ended rich response question.
I'll add that obviously it's very different, but there's a lot of overlap there with the stroller using community, which is a big part of the town, and probably a more consistent group in terms of needs and constraints.
That's an important mobility device, isn't it? A
stroller. It's very eye-opening in terms of accessibility shortages.
Do we feel like we could just sort of like say, if you use any of the following, a wheelchair, a personal mobility device, or a scooter, and encounter unique challenges in the community, can you please, you know, explain them here, or something sort of like broad and inclusive? Does that feel like
the stroller in there too? I mean, as long as it's open-ended.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. I will I'll put strollers in here.
Because as a stroller user, I would hesitate to comment on, you know, the needs of disabled folks.
No, I mean, I don't think it's insulting to combine those, does it? But it's just,
no, yeah,
these
but
are
good to call it out separately. Include it there is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you thinking that there might be like a box for people to insert their comments in this section or in the subsection?
I think we would want to do something similar to what we have here. You know, a sort of long format question, a question with a open-ended area for them to fill out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of important because the one thing that's true about Concord, I think we'll all agree on, is that there are very different neighborhoods in the town with different infrastructure. So, you know, where Nick lives, for example, there's no sidewalks. Where I live, there are sidewalks, but they're in poor condition. And it's also very close to services. So, you know, it would be good to find a way to capture. I realize we just, you know, sort of got rid of the neighborhood question, but it would be good to try to capture that in some way.
Me say something about that, that it if okay, it bothers me that there was this asking about, you know, to get a chance at a $25 gift certificate, put your email. I mean, and we'll keep it in Stentech will keep it anonymous, etc. You know, neighborhood or street, at least street name, or but street name, of course, some are really long. You know, if we combine it with something, yeah, go ahead.
Let's address those questions when we get to them down at the bottom, and keep this in mind as we work towards those. Do any specific advice for verbiage here? I mean, we can just let them come up with the question, but do you have any specific thing that you want to be in this open-ended question?
I guess it's better to ask what challenges or obstacles, difficulties, whatever, or difficulties, you know, do you encounter? Something, I don't know what you guys think. I mean, it's not good, and I think Stephen might agree, it's not good to ask the public what they want built, but to ask them what the problem they're having. Does that make sense to people or not?
Yeah.
Does this feel good, close enough?
Yeah.
I think it's close enough.
Okay, so I'm just going to scroll back up to the top, but remember that we're ending with that question. Okay, so we've got our, how often do you walk? Any comments on this one?
That's fine.
Okay, how safe?
By the way, I still have this question about the mobility device, but given that you have a separate question, you might be able to parse it out, because to me, walking and traveling, you know, like it or not, walking and traveling with a mobility device, the infrastructure walking may be more flexible. So
one question that actually brings up for me just is, we ask at the beginning of this survey about how often do you use modes for transportation. And actually, now that I'm looking at this question, I'm thinking that we need to suggest an edit here. Which modes of transportation versus recreational purposes, which are two very different use cases. You know, somebody who's walking for pleasure is very different from somebody who's walking to school or walking to the grocery store. So it may be valuable, or my recommendation would be to add into these questions about walking and biking would be, how often do you typically walk to, you know, to meet your transportation needs, or to things, you know, like something getting at, this is about transportation, not recreation. Does that, do others?
Important clarification. Especially, I think a couple people made the point about all the recreational cyclists in town, and the difference between their needs and the transportation cyclists.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, we're going to need to have something consistent for both walking and cycling here. Does this start to get at that? I don't think we need to make it perfect, but just to be able to say in here that this needs to specify transportation, not recreation.
Well, can't we fit that in with the third question about recreational uses? Just ask for percentages, go along the lines of what Nick was talking about. what percentage of the time do you bike for recreation, and what percentage do you bike for transportation?
Oh, so
Okay.
basically turning this into a matrix and asking people to,
Daily, weekly, monthly, rarely.
Or just expand questions 2 and 3 to identify the percentages.
What is the wisdom of people checking boxes in a matrix versus a linear, list in terms of getting confused? Or it begins to sound like you're filling out your income taxes or something.
yeah, I'm a little worried about complexity here. And I do want to ask, what are we getting out of understanding people's recreational habits in their frequency? I mean, like, we've got a question up at the top to kind of get at, like, do you have experience walking? Do you have experience cycling? Which I think is what the recreational question is about. It kind of helps us understand where their feedback might be coming from in terms of, I feel really safe biking in Concord. Well, they cycle every day as a recreational cyclist. That gives us some good information. I'm not sure if frequency here, getting frequency on recreational uses is helpful.
You could just have a question. Do you if you have a specific question for the transportation needs, not to matrix it, you could have another very simple question. Do you walk for recreation or exercise? It's not as clear, but anyway, it's just a thought.
We have asked that question though, because we asked that question here, and we're asking
Good.
frequency. How often do
Then
you
we
walk
already have it.
daily? Yeah.
Then we have
Right,
it.
'cause I think that's an important question of, like, how are people using the roads? And if we're looking at Monument Street as an example, and we know that it's very popular with recreational cyclists, does that affect how we end up prioritizing different projects, whether they're used recreationally or transportationally?
Yeah, I think in conjunction with that first question, at least the way I'm thinking right now, it's fine to just narrow it to transportation and leave it at that.
All right. I'm just going to put in a note here. We don't have to wordsmith it. We should specify that we are asking about walking for transportation, not recreation. And I will leave it to Stantec to wordsmith that.
Yeah,
And we'll do the same
You
thing.
could also just say typical walk between destination, between destinations or to a destination, not for recreation or something like that.
I like that. I like that it's destination and not, because practical, like, we want to know if people are walking to the restaurants too, or to the umbrella for a show, which is a recreational pursuit, but it's a transportation need.
I think
It's a destination though.
Yes, that's why I'm saying I like the destination.
No, but we're trying to make it simple and get some information, but all data is fuzzy. I'm sorry to say.
Yes. All right, let's keep moving. How safe do you feel walking in Concord? Very straightforward. Are we happy with this question?
Why are we asking it?
I don't. Yeah, I
really
don't
broad.
like it. I would rather have that open-ended or something, if we have it at all.
Phrased it in a better way. Question 10.
Yeah.
Or no, what I'm looking at, am I looking at the right one? Is there
Yeah.
We're on
question
question 10, yes.
different question 10 that says,
Oh,
why don't you walk somewhere?
I think that you might be looking at the older version of the survey.
do you have this screen that what Laura is showing?
I'm looking at the online survey, like the checkbox format.
No.
I don't think that they did they got some more feedback from the staff today. So I think that things moved around a little bit between when
Okay.
they mocked it up.
Well, I think there's two in there that are kind of redundant. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, 10 and 11 on here.
I think I'm back, and I think this question is a little strange because just knowing it without getting specifics, what does the answer tell us? I
Which
mean,
question are we on right now? 10 or
number
11?
10?
10.
Number
The
10.
Okay.
only answer here is it depends.
It without getting into specifics, I don't know what the answer to this question tells us.
Nothing.
There must be some time I don't feel safe walking in Concord. You'd have to be a fool to feel safe walking everywhere in Concord, right?
Well, could we put it in, like, say, in general or typically,
But
or
it is general now. That's the problem with it. See, I think if the problem is you really need to get into some details to get useful information out of a question like this, right? Are we dealing with a crosswalk problem? Are we dealing with a old roads that don't have sidewalks problem? Are we dealing with speeding cars? What is it?
to play devil's advocate here, I find temperature checks to be helpful. I find it helpful to get a sense of this person feels wildly unsafe walking in Concord, and they feel like all of these things are like it kind of just gives you a sense of like overall, where are we? Because maybe it's going to be, we're going to find people in general feel pretty safe walking, but they feel wildly unsafe biking. That's good information to have. And we're going to get into specifics in the next question. I don't think that we make decisions based on these very big generalities. And the other thing I would just say is it's a good lead-in question to help people think, when do I, like, am I feeling unsafe and why do I feel unsafe? It's a good sort of progression in thought for somebody who's not deep in the weeds with us.
Well, it's different for different people. When I see this question, what comes up for me is, well, most of the time I feel great, but sometimes I don't. So how the heck do I answer this question? So I mean, that maybe other people answer it more helpfully.
Well, I find the three middle choices to be totally useless. I mean, what's the difference between somewhat safe and somewhat unsafe? They're really in neutral.
I wonder if there isn't a way to, I understand what Laura is saying about a temperature check, but it's interesting that 10, 11, and 12 are cutting at something similar from different ways. And I'm wondering if they couldn't all be combined into one question, which, I mean, let me just say this. So I think 10 is too vague to be useful. And we're trying to cut questions to shorten the survey. So I question that. 11, I don't like the somewhere because it doesn't make it clear whether it's to a destination or along a place. But 12 could possibly be, assuming that Stephen doesn't think it's too specific, you could sort of say, if you walk, what things would make walking feel safer or more comfortable for you in town? And then some of the things in 11 as choices and some of the things in 12 could be put there. Like lack of seating, you put in 12, you put places to sit down and rest, and turn it all kind of positive. So I'm just wondering if there isn't a way to, I know I'm sort of tearing up the carpet, but that's my comment.
Well, before we move on to 11 and 12, I think that's a great point, Mark. Do we feel fine just leaving this here? Most members don't find this question actionable or useful. One member thought it was valuable as a temperature check. Would any of us be mad if it stayed in? I mean, like, I don't think
you make a good point. And I think also, some people might get hung up on it, but for the most part, it's not going to take up a lot of people's time and energy. They'll just answer it and keep going.
Yeah, but if you're trying to reduce from 39, you got to reduce, right?
It's useless information,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Can I interject? Can I interject, Laura?
Yeah.
I think if the answers to 10 so vague, you think that it wouldn't matter, but if they add it, if Stantec takes that and throws it somewhere, it may skew the analysis. Because if everybody comes up and says, very unsafe, that'll probably just, skew what they're trying to get to. So I think Mark's suggestion about just eliminate it altogether is probably the best.
Another point to keeping it might be that, you can then isolate the responses of the unsafe and very unsafe respondents and see what do they have in common? Where do those people live? How are they using, it could be that all the people who walk from the train station to CCHS have a similar complaint, and it could be a way to isolate different groups. But no,
I think it's not a good question, and it might be harmful because
let's agree to disagree on this one. I think we've spent enough time on it. I think that what we've got here says, some members don't like it, some members do like it. We also need to get, Steve, thank you for your comment. I think that the staff will have their own feelings about what kind of information they need to do their jobs. So I think it's also valuable for us to represent.
If we are going to keep it, if we're going to keep it, could I suggest we reverse the order of the 5 categories? Make very safe the top, very unsafe the bottom.
Okay.
Can I also make a tweak? Instead of somewhat, put generally, because as I think Nick pointed out, or someone else, there's going to be a dangerous place in every town, no matter what, no matter how friendly it is. So instead of somewhat, I would say generally unsafe or generally safe or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And you could put, instead of very, you should say extremely. I don't know.
I like that. Yeah.
I like generally safe instead of very safe.
Yeah. What? I'm sorry if I missed this, but there had been talk before about distinction between recreational and purposeful walking, you getting someplace or running errands. Is that governing in here? Is that true in here, or are they all mixed together intentionally?
We made the recommendation while you were gone, Nick, that they should be specific about purposeful walking in these sections. And Mark made the recommendation that we put in to a destination as a way to help people understand that.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So Mark put on the table an idea of combining 11 and 12. They are relatively repetitive. They kind of ask the same question one way and then they reverse it. So how do folks feel about that?
Combining? Is that the question?
Yeah, Mark, what was your proposal here?
Let me put something on the table. Let me just say, instead of I don't like choose not to walk somewhere, because somewhere could mean on a certain path or to a certain place that you have to go. And so it's inherently vague. And the other thing is what would encourage you to walk. I think that is the goal to encourage people to walk or not? That's a whole different thing. But we could say, what are some of the things that you, in your opinion, might help people who help people who want to walk or travel with this in and around Concord? Check all, either whatever you want to say, check all that you think would help, or the ones that you think are important. I mean, it's a perceptual question, because it's not every place needs different infrastructure. But on the other hand, the things in the walking my comment back, in 11, you talk about the weather, and we're not going to do anything about the weather. So I don't know.
I would totally support an idea of combining these two just for simplicity's sake. I think that, but I do want to make sure we get 2 things out of any questions here. One is I'd like to capture who is actually gonna walk? Like, which of the people responding to this survey are just like never gonna walk? You know, we're not gonna ever build infrastructure that's gonna let them walk, you know, because they're just not interested. They're not physically able to, they don't have enough time, they're just hate rain. You know, I think it is important to be able to isolate answers from people who say those things. Like, would they ever walk? And the answer is no, I'm never going to walk to a destination. I just
And
live far away.
ask that question. Then make sure that that's a possible answer.
So you would say remove that as a but my only question is, I don't want it to be a leading question, because I think that there are a lot of people who want to say that they would walk somewhere, but they won't really. But they will say that rain, weather deters them from walking. And that is it's helpful in understanding what people actually do versus what they wish they do, which is a different thing.
Right. That's a great distinction. Yes. Aspiration answers.
In terms of it being a leading question, it doesn't list an option of I don't choose not to walk.
It does say I'm not interested in walking. That is one of the options.
No, but this is the double negative of that. I walk no matter what. I don't choose not to walk.
I don't.
So I do choose to walk. It's a double negative.
Right. That shouldn't be on both lists.
No, I mean, there should be people that say, I'm not limited my walking pursuits by anything. I'll walk no matter what.
Mm.
You could, can you scroll it down a tiny bit so I can see the top of 11? No, the other way.
Oh, sorry.
You could ask a question that says, it's different. Instead of saying what would encourage you or the reasons you choose not to walk, you could say what are some of the obstacles or what things discourage you from walking? But again, that's kind of leading.
If none of these apply, skip to question 12.
I like them as separate questions. They're
I mean,
different.
This is trying to solicit negative feedback. And I feel like there should be something more positive as an option.
You could start with we could start with like I always walk. I
Walk anyway.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, the second and third to last bullets on 11, if they were the first ones in 12, that gets at the people that wouldn't walk. And then at the end of the bullets in 12, you could put I'll walk anyway, no matter what. I don't know. I don't know. It's a strange thing.
I think that first bullet point there has 3 separate things that should maybe be split, not to add to the list, but too far, don't have time, and bad weather are seem like 3 very different reasons.
You're right.
That might be covered already, even in the other options. I feel like don't have time is going to be a big one.
What do we get from having the distinction between those two things in our data set?
Too far, too long?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, the first question is a select all, and the second makes you choose 3. And that was like when I went through and did this, I found that immediately kind of slows you down because, and I see the point, because you could easily check all of those things and say, yes, I want all of these. But maybe you want to ask them to pick 3, but don't force them to pick 3. And then that also kind of keeps things moving for respondents who, don't have the time to stop and prioritize their 4 things down to 3.
So we should maybe change them to be parallel. So our recommendation here would be these should be the same, select up to 3. It would kind of give people the top 3 for both of these things.
Obviously it's good information to have all. I see why they did that, the select all and then select 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes sense to keep it how they have.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the comments that we had submitted mentioned that why are we choosing only 3?
Right.
You know, choose all that apply.
I'm a big
So
fan of
we
select all.
want them both to be select all? I'm sorry,
I think so. I mean, that's my bias.
Yeah, I think 3, you know, unless you say the major one or something, I would make it all.
the only thing I would push back on here is we have a limited amount of money and staff time, and we need to figure out, this is our opportunity to get a sense from the community, which things are the most important. Because I mean, I would check every single one of these. Like, I'd like all of them.
That's true.
That's exactly how they caught me. It's like, yes.
Well, I mean, another way to split this is into things. If you have 2 questions, one of them could be about things that the town can't change, like how far, pretty much like the weather or how far things are, and the other one would be about things that it could change. Again, I think there's some, and another concern I have here is that this really may bog some people down. Not everybody likes reading so many things to check.
Yeah,
So,
we're only at question 12. That's
Huh?
a third of the way into this, and it's a lot of questions.
yeah,
My own thought is that trying to channel people into answers can get you funny data. And this is another case where probably no one else, survey people don't like this. I'd rather see someone give a free-form answer and say, why don't you walk?
yeah,
We can
that's
make what we will of the data.
yeah, I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
you may get a false granularity of data with you know, I mean, if we do select all, I think what Laura said is that a lot of people like me would check everything. So you know, or none. So maybe they should be open-ended.
Yeah.
Name,
What if we?
name up to 3 things that would encourage you to walk more.
Yes.
And the other one is
That's better. That's great. Yeah.
name up to 3 things that would encourage you to walk more. I mean, you could put in parentheses some examples below, you know, but they're not choices. You force
No,
somebody
I
to
don't think
write.
you should have any examples. We want
Okay.
to know we want
Okay.
to know what's in their heads and what's preventing it. We
Okay.
don't want them giving our answers back to us.
Okay. So maybe choose is the wrong thing. So what is the word, like write that,
List.
please
One
write
of the
down,
three
please
things.
write down up to 3 things that would encourage you to walk more or something.
It's
Can I,
three
I'm just going to
improvements.
push back against this for 1 second.
Sure.
Because it goes back to something that Phil said in our last meeting. Most people don't know. And I talk to people all day about this stuff. Most people don't know. Most people are like, it's just hard. I just don't do it. Or maybe there's one specific thing, like one specific crosswalk that they think about. But most people are not thinking about, you know, like we have to explain what the Bruce Freeman that is a shared use path. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of things that I do think that more open-ended questions is good, but I also think that giving people something to chew on and respond to can be helpful. Because open-ended questions, I've done quite a few surveys myself. A lot of open-ended questions, people skip them. Most people skip them, or they give very short answers. Most people don't write an essay. You get like 5-10 really good open-ended responses, but you won't get a lot from it. And Mariana, I'd be interested to know, because I think you've done more surveys than I have. And Steve, I bet you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the easier you make it, right, like maybe check all of them is too easy. But yeah, you definitely, you know, the easier the question is, the more likely someone will answer it.
Another way to cut at this would be to say, or to ask, since you have an other, taking into account what Laura was just saying, can we eliminate some of the, or simplify some of these wordy selections?
I'm in full support of that.
So, I mean, and again, between 11 and 12, there's some kind of double coverage of something. Do you know what I mean? So I'm trying to figure how to make that more efficient.
Would this be a reasonable place to ask for specific examples too? Because, you know, I think anyone answering this question is thinking better maintenance of the existing sidewalks. I'm thinking of a specific place where that's a problem. Intersection, I'm thinking of a specific crosswalk that's missing. I know we're not trying to get too much into specifics and keep an eye on the big picture here, but this might be a good question to start getting some of those if we want that information on this.
I mean, I would support that if we could boil 11 and 12 down to one question. So for example, one of them says better lighting and the other one says lack of lighting or whatever, right? Poor lighting or something, right? So again, you know, that's kind of redundant, right?
Mhm.
So if somehow these could be boiled into one question, then the next one if you would like, please name a specific location in town where there's a significant challenge to walking or something, or you know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah,
we are
thanks,
going to
Mark.
have, just to remind you, there is a map at the end where people can drop pins with specific.
Yeah.
And so this is also the opportunity to be priming them for that.
Yeah.
Getting them to think about the sidewalks, the intersections. So, you know, but I do agree. I think we need to simplify this. I think you're right, Mark. We could just put a note in here, we could just put a note in here that says these two things are duplicating themselves. We could also send this home as homework. If somebody wants to come and go and chew on this for 20 minutes and think about how they want to simplify this, I would be happy to suggest somebody take this home, because I don't want to spend, we're running out of time real fast here.
Or give it back to Stantec with our feedback and say, hey, can you take another crack at these two?
Yeah, can they combine those two? It's kind of asking the same thing from two directions.
Okay.
And we could all take a look at it.
Okay, I'm going to put in here and just say, we feel these two questions are too similar. They could be combined into a single question. And I would say, or if we're going to keep both, we should have fewer answers for each.
Okay, and one other comment. If they want to say lack of bathroom access to long walking routes, just say no bathrooms. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
It's so really technical.
We're getting to. I have that problem. I use too many words, so I have to fight against it.
Okay.
As an example to them, you know, shorten things.
I would like to see a positive option in number 11. So that, you know, I walk.
Do you want to flip it positive?
Yeah.
I don't choose not to walk.
In the choices.
I would ask a question. What would help you walk more or feel more comfortable?
No, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable walking anywhere I want to go in town, you know, with the exception of crossing Route 2.
So do you have a way to positively combine 11 and 12 as a question?
Pose that as an option. If you're going to have people select, say, I don't have any problem.
Motion to proceed.
Well, do you think that you would get at that from this person is a daily walker who said that they feel somewhat or generally safe walking around Concord? So we've asked these questions before.
Yeah, so then they skip 11 and 12.
Yeah, well, and they do have the option of doing that. So
okay.
All right. So are we happy with this as our feedback to them?
It's kicking the can, sure.
And I think that if any of us have a particularly strong idea of what should be in here, you can send those comments about this particular section separately. If I have time in my week, maybe I'll eat on this for a little bit and see what happens.
Should we send it to Steve or Stephen, or who should we send it to if we do something?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we can't send it to
you or Aaron.
or both?
Send it both of us. One of us will deal with whatever you have.
And Mark, just as a point on, we don't have to talk about this for very long, but I did check in with Kari about whether I could receive comments from committee members. And since there is precedent, there is a way for me to do that because there are some committees that are not staffed. So there has to be methods for sharing that, but we can talk about that another time.
Right. Yeah, there is a way.
Right now, we've got a staff person, but we do need to be, we need to know what the roles are there. All right, moving on. Biking in Concord. So I would say we should be clear and consistent and say to a destination, if that's the way we're going to talk about this. Maybe in parentheses, not for recreational purposes. Unless we don't want to specify that in these questions.
It's a different animal. Biking recreationally and biking for transportation are different.
And we're trying to assess people's travel habits, not their recreational habits. We're not the recreation committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, there is Dan and Laura, there is some overlap. So how does not for recreational purposes work versus not just for recreational purposes? Is it? I'm not saying put just. I'm just asking you because there is. I think it's better just leave it. I don't know. What do you guys think is the way to draw the line? I'm preferring right now not for recreational purposes, but I'm just raising that question.
Maybe you could say not just for purely recreational purposes.
That sounds good.
That's pretty vague.
Well, as somebody who is a pretty ardent cyclist and bicycles often, there are a lot of people who bike just for recreation. They'll get together, like the Monsters Bike Club will get together and they'll ride, and they're not going to the supermarket. They're going to do a recreational ride.
As opposed to you and Laura.
As opposed to me, riding to, town hall on my bike, or Laura going almost anywhere on a bike. Right, exactly. I mean, I engage in both of those things, but I think you'll get very different responses if you're suggesting to people that they're going someplace to do something as opposed to simply taking a bike ride.
Yeah, and those are the people we want to capture.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That's agreed.
Okay.
I'm scrolling up here because I'm looking for our generally answers here, because I think that's the way to go about all of these.
So
Where did I put
could you
them?
review that again, Laura? What words did we finally land on?
For these options down here, we said generally safe, somewhat safe, neutral, somewhat unsafe,
generally
and
safe.
generally safe. Or
Did they
generally
not
unsafe.
get saved?
What?
Did they not get saved last time?
I think that they're
In the comment.
here,
Oh,
but I
okay.
thought that it would be better for me to just put them in properly.
Yeah. And we should have those in the biking part.
Yeah. So I'll just put them in there as well.
Good. Perfect.
Oh, that's the wrong section. Hold on. Up here.
14.
Yeah, 14. All right. Are we happy with those two?
Yes.
Moving on. What types of surfaces infrastructure are you feeling, are you most comfortable biking? There are a lot of answers here. I personally would be super interested to know the answer to this question, but curious what others think of this question.
Are bikes supposed to be ridden on sidewalks?
No,
Kids.
but
People
kids.
do. Yeah.
But
People
that's
will send their
recreational.
children on sidewalks.
Okay.
And children are technically legally allowed to ride on sidewalks. Adults are not supposed to in commercial districts. You're allowed to ride on the sidewalk outside of commercial districts, unless you're on an e-bike, in which case you're not allowed to ride on the sidewalk at all.
I see
I
it a
did
lot
not-
near the bike path too, like people who, don't want to cross traffic just to kind of like go a few yards down the street.
And in terms of understanding people's travel habits now, it would be very helpful to know how many people only feel comfortable on a paved sidewalk or a bike path?
We say across Route 2.
I don't understand that.
I mean, that's kind of getting into a slightly, it's not a surface. So I'm just saying it might be confusing, and that might be fit into intersections and all those kind of things.
Well, here's my question. Would it be more clear if we said across a major highway? Because we're talking about different kinds of infrastructure on a high traffic road. So we could say like Sudbury Road. But we don't have to specify that because there are a lot of high traffic roads, but we only have one highway that goes through Concord.
Why would anybody pick that as their favorite type of biking?
It's not. Oh,
that's the
it does
question,
say most. I didn't see
Yeah.
that it said most.
That's why this question didn't make sense to me. You know, who would pick a narrow shoulder over a wide shoulder?
I would say this should be a rate your comfort on, rate your comfort.
Maybe this one could be a matrix, like I would never, from never to sure at daily. Which of these would you go on? Do you think paved sidewalk and stone dust sidewalk can be combined with paved and unpaved trail or path? Since the sidewalk bike usage is a pretty narrow group.
Yeah, I think having sidewalk prominent and first is a little confusing. So
Misleading.
I would support that. Or sidewalk where appropriate could be added to the
that technically
trail or
falls
paths,
under-
trail or path separate from traffic, or sidewalk paved, unpaved. That might, I don't know.
I would really like to not see sidewalk anywhere in these choices.
We can leave it. I mean, if a path separate from traffic is a sidewalk, or vice versa, whatever. So you could leave it out.
Agree with that.
Okay. You've convinced me.
No,
And also we have others, so if people feel like they need to write in sidewalk, they can do that.
I still think that across Route 2, there's something asymmetrical about that I'm not sure what most comfortable.
How comfortable are you?
I mean, well, I think it's a good question if you drop that across Route 2 and try to capture that a different way.
How about this? I would say parallel construction to the one before. How safe do you feel on the following, types of infrastructure? And then do a matrix with the exact same how safe you feel? Because that's what I want to know. Like, I would never ever bike on, I would never bike across Route 2, if just to pick on that one, since that one, I would never bike across Route 2. I would maybe bike on an unprotected bike lane. I would always bike. I would feel very safe biking on a separated trail.
So the question
really good format for this.
The question should not read on what surface you're most comfortable. It should say rank the comfort of biking on these following surfaces with the matrix.
Yeah, I like the matrix idea. With the cross Route 2, I'd feel better if the wording said something like cycling across Route 2 or something. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't describe. I mean, pedestrians cross it, you can walk your bike. That's one way to get it, and it's a way to get across Route 2. If what you mean is going with traffic on a bike, I don't know. I'm just saying there's something funny about it. I don't know what Laura and Phil think. I mean, if you think it's clear and you could answer it clearly, that's fine with me.
Well, it doesn't address the issue that there are lights controlling the intersections of the crossings. I mean, you can look at this and think that I'm going to shoot across at an uncontrolled intersection.
I'm happy to cut it. I'm pretty sure it got in there because I put it in as one of the things that I wanted to see in this particular question. I would just say that when we spoke with people at, the public events where we were talking to people in public, the fact that crossing Route 2 came up over and over and over, almost in every conversation that we had about biking, specifically biking in Concord, I think that to not call it out specifically as a piece of infrastructure in the community that is a barrier, like, and it, for me, it also just like helps me understand like how many people are just never going to bike in Concord until we build a bridge over Route 2, because that's like a really significant group of people.
So Laura, if we were to keep it in there, but use the matrix method for answering this question, would that satisfy? I mean, that would satisfy me.
You've convinced me. If you use the matrix method, I'm convinced. Then I think
And
it's a useful question.
Yeah, and remove the first two, and I would also take out I am not comfortable biking at all, because that will fall out from the matrix.
Yep.
Right, you'll get that with the never, never, never people.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So are we happy with what we've got left? How do you feel biking on the following? Generally safe, somewhat safe, neutral, somewhat unsafe, generally unsafe, being consistent throughout. So we've got 3 kinds of bike lanes, 2 kinds of paths, 3 kinds of streets, and the highway.
Right. That works.
Okay.
Phil, you good with that? You're the biking guru. Okay.
Do we need other if it's a matrix?
No.
Oh, well, to add if someone wants to say something about sidewalks.
Yeah.
You could say any
You wouldn't
further
be able to-
comments.
There wouldn't be a place for them to write anything in, though. It's just going to be check boxes.
No, but you could add it to the bottom of the list and then check your boxes. So you could like add sidewalks and then say always or never.
But we wouldn't know what they mean by other, because when we were looking at this matrix, other is just,
Oh, they can't add a line there.
oh, if you select other in the question, please explain. Oh, okay. If it's that way, I think that's fine.
You missed it though, so the average person's gonna miss it.
Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't reading it
I
linear.
don't know. I think a person who's like, "Oh, you didn't mention my thing," is gonna find the place to be like, "Let me tell you my thing."
Yeah, where I cried. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Where you cried. Is that what you said? Okay. So we're probably going to have a very similar conversation about these 2 questions being the same as the walking questions. It's sort of because I think this is a parallel structure thing. So which of the following describes the reasons you choose not to bike somewhere? What 3 things would encourage you to bike more within and around Concord? The first question gets at all the reasons why a person might not do that. And the second gets to actionable things that the town could do and helps us get a sense of, from residents, about what is the most, or residents and folks who work here, what is the most important thing here.
Well, I'll just say one thing, that it is information to know if people say it's too far, but doesn't that, I mean, are we talking about somebody who bikes a lot, but then they don't bike a particular place? Or are we talking about somebody who hardly bikes or doesn't bike at all because it's always feels too far, or they live too far away? I'm just not sure. I'm just, again, I'm kind of wondering if we don't have too many categories. And the weather thing, it's easy to say it bothers you, but what are we going to do about it? So, too far, weather, what are we going to do about it? I don't know. So the positive ones about, lighting, bike parking, I mean, I almost feel like the people here who cycle a lot should almost highlight which are, you know, I know you're sort of pre-selecting, but you know, what are the things that really are important?
I'd reverse the offering of these two as well. I think that starting out with the positives is a lot better for
Well, I
soliciting.
would,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I'd like to be, I would like to be asked at first, you know, what 3 things encourage me to bike more around Concord? And then, you know, which of the following describes reason you wouldn't bike around Concord? I don't like the negative first. It gets a bad flavor in my mouth.
I would entertain, I wasn't this, when we were talking about walking, I wasn't convinced, but I feel convinced now that we could just lose 16 and the corresponding question in the walking section and just focus on actionable items. We do have the option down here. I am not interested in biking. I am not interested in walking, which somewhat gets at the people who are just never going to be convinced. So I would entertain just cutting both of those questions for lengths and in simplicity's sake. And I would say let's keep as many options here as possible, because these are things that I've recognized around town, things that I've heard other people say around town, and it's certainly not an extensive list. So I'd rather have more options.
Tonight, tomorrow morning, I can take you to see Dr. Sager again.
And Nick, I just want to let you know you're unmuted.
Place, okay?
Nick?
Nick, yeah, okay, great.
You're not, okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's good. And, you know, I'd rather have one rich question than 2 sort of confusing, overlapping ones that also, again, what are we going to do about the weather? That's not really, you know.
Phil, Mariana, what do you guys think of that?
I'm
Sorry,
good
I
with
just had to step away for a second. I do think weather wise and weather maintenance are right, because we can't change the weather, but like for example, the rail trail not being plowed in the winter makes it really hard to use. And same thing with like plowing the shoulders where there aren't sidewalks. So I think weather related maintenance is a really important point. But like, you know, not liking the weather, it's none of our business.
Yeah,
are those appropriately?
I would be very specific. I wouldn't really use the word maintenance. I would say plowing in winter, things like, you know, I would be very specific so that we know what people are referring to. And if you want to say, you know, roads, you know, maintenance of the surface, you know, talk about that. Plowing
whether it's the town or the residents that are clearing
snow and
sidewalks.
ice removal or treatment. Yeah, snow and ice removal is really good generic way to put it.
Yep.
I would just maybe make that consistent up here too. Snow and ice removal. So it's just simpler in both locations. Better lighting, snow and ice removal, much simpler. Okay, so we're taking this away. I'm going to take this away and I'm going to say we want to cut this and we want to just have number 12 and we'll do the same thing down below.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to delete this one then and take this out. And we'll say we feel these 2 questions are too similar. We would like to focus on what is actionable. That capture everybody's feelings about that?
Yep, that's good.
You missed a few words crossing out in the other
Oh.
one, but I don't know if Stantec should figure it out.
Yeah.
I can go back and clean up formatting issues with this document later. I'll make sure that it's very clean. So,
Sounds good.
but I won't change the content. I did just also add in here, I'm physically unable to ride a bicycle or tricycle. I'm trying to be more inclusive. There are people who can ride a tricycle but cannot ride a bicycle.
I think that's really good. I like 17. I think it's really good.
Great. Moving on to public transit. I think this is the trickiest section personally, because what we're trying to understand in this section is how are people using public transit now? What are their general perceptions about public transit? But getting at it in a way that we can use it once we're, if we choose to design a public transit service here in Concord. So that's sort of the goal that I see for this section. But before we jump into the specifics, curious what others made of this section. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I'm seeing it for the first time, and I think 18 and 19 can be scratched because I think somebody put in a boilerplate from, New York City or something.
Well, I think they were just going with
If you're
parallel
asking about-
construction.
Yes, I understand. I'm just making a joke, but I don't. I think 18, 19 can be crossed out.
I mean, the MBTA does catch on fire, so safety is a concern.
Yeah,
Right,
Just
unless,
they
mean,
worked on
yeah.
that. The Orange Line has got a lot of repairs.
Yeah, I think 20 is useful, but 18 and 19, it's just, you don't even know what they're thinking.
unless we're talking about taking the commuter rail from West Concord to the depot, which is probably a small number of people.
Yeah, that's a significant thing. I think that ought to be $1. You pay $1 and you can go.
Well, the
Yeah, free.
the fact is they don't collect the fare, so you don't have to pay anything.
That's true. That's true. So we can cross those out.
Do you feel, I'm curious about how often people take public transit. I'd be interested to know if people are taking public transit every day. Maybe they're taking it in Boston. It gives us a sense of, do people even have an appetite for this sort of thing?
Well, do you mean? Well, you just said Boston, so that's
in
one
Concord, In
Right, but
general,
this is
I mean,
getting at commuter traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I had thought too about the 20 could potentially, well, some of it could be a matrix in terms of how often you use it, but anyway, it's pretty good the way it is, I think.
Where do you even pick up the Yankee line here?
The Crosby's parking lot.
parking lot, right next to that red building in the Crosby's parking lot.
Also,
It
the
goes-
paparazzi parking lot used to be, I don't know if it still is.
I mean, it wouldn't even hurt to say there, it runs between Crosby's parking lot and Copley Square, but just to let people know
Yeah,
what
a lot
we're
of people might
talking
not
about.
know about it.
Yeah.
Little advertisement for
Yes,
it.
a little. I mean, why not? Surveys can inform. I mean, we're
You're
partly
trying-
trying to get people to think about things.
Well, but you're asking them what they've used in the past tense.
I know. Yeah.
It is a little advertisement for it. I'd be perfectly fine cutting these two questions. Is everybody on board with this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just put into Copley Square. If we're using some parentheses, why not? Do we want frequency on this data similar to the frequencies that we have up top, or are we just happy with which ones have you ever used?
Makes sense
Or
to do the
do-
matrix here.
Or do you want to ask which ones have you used in the past year or something?
Like post-COVID or something like that?
Yeah, it seems like putting a time frame on it. I
But
mean,
yeah, within
it's kind of
the past
useless.
year is good.
What I did 10 years ago is kind of useless.
Yeah.
It distorts the data.
You
But if you took it once as opposed to commuting with it, there's a big difference.
right,
Yeah.
but you could either take the ones except for the trolley and make a tiny matrix, or you could ask another question and says, which of these do you use, typically once a week or once a month, or I don't know. There might be some way to make a
But
simple
even
question.
if you just said which of these have you used more than once in the past year, that's a lot more information.
So this is our little matrix from up above, daily, a few times a week, a few times a month, a few times a year.
Yeah, that's fine.
We could just have that as the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's useful. That's good.
oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm gonna give everybody vertigo here, sorry.
Yes.
That's good information. The trolley is a little bit of a oddball there, but
Leave the trolley out.
it's probably okay.
I don't know.
I'm seeing that we have one option that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one that has this one I think was the one that I took from the National Household Survey. Maybe I would say
Once a week?
fewer options are better, but maybe we change this to rarely.
That's
Yeah,
good.
people might not remember, but
Because once a week is the same as a few times a month.
Yes. That would be 4 times a month.
Perfect.
it's pretty cool. I think that's
Okay.
pretty good.
Yeah, a few times a week, a few times a month. Okay, so should I change all of them to be consistent with this? Is this our preferred set, or do we want to wordsmith this at all?
Which the daily a few times a month, rarely, never.
Versus you can see them, they're crossed out up here. This was the standard that was in here before. Daily, several times a week, once a week, a few times a month, rarely, never. This cuts out one, but just, do we like the words for those two
Yeah, 5 options is nice.
instead of 6?
5 options. So in terms of the other side of the matrix, so Council on Aging, MBTA, commuter, rail, Yankee Line commuter, the trolley is different. And are there any others? I mean, does other mean anything, or we don't need that?
So could we include like taxi cabs and Uber in that section? It's not exactly public transportation, but it's not exactly private transportation either. I don't.
Public or private transit services.
You hold that thought and we put that in the driving section.
Okay.
But hold on to that thought because I'll forget
It
it. by the time
belongs
we get
more
there.
here, actually.
Are there other vans? Like, is there a Best Western van now? I heard that they have some transportation.
I don't have enough information about it
I
to
think
know.
it's worth keeping other, because there might be, maybe not public, but if there's like church-based transit help.
Work shuttles we may not know about.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Other, it's a low cost to include other, might be helpful.
I like within the past year, I'm not sure how to wordsmith this to include that, but how often do you typically take the following public transit services? And maybe like, can somebody think of a better way to wordsmith this so that it does include in the past year?
Often have you taken the following public transit services in the past year?
Mark, have you worked as an editor at one point in your life? You're very good at this.
I've read many a 40-page technical patent document and discussed it with lawyers.
Okay, gotta fix that at some point. Okay, well, this is excellent. Thank you for being here for that part. Okay, are we happy with this? Can we keep moving?
Sorry, I just thought of, I know that Minuteman Arc runs vans. Is that worth having its own category? Or is that kind of going with the COA?
COA is a town-run service, which is why it's called out specifically here.
Or other, because like Newburyport has a van. Other,
Yeah. That's.
or those just all go into other, like.
I think it would
Mariana?
have.
Which were you adding?
I know Minuteman Arc has a van, as well as Newburyport and the other retirement communities. Which is again private, but maybe worth having a category like private community or nonprofits.
You could say public or nonprofit or community or something transit.
Yeah.
Is that data going to
Community.
help us with anything here, though? I mean, those are private. That's for Minuteman Arc.
Yeah, maybe not.
It doesn't expand the normal. I mean, the regular citizens' travel options in town.
Yeah,
I think that sounds like a good research project for like one of us to do at some point to find out all of the shuttles. We could put an open-ended question in here, but again, we're trying to cut questions, not add questions.
Just in terms of understanding how people are
Yeah.
using the options that do exist.
yeah. Not to belabor the point, but does anybody know whether the passenger car called the Ride, which is run by the T, does that
Oh,
come to Concord?
it does come
Yeah.
to Concord, and that should be on here.
It's. I may be wrong, but I think the only reason it comes to Concord is to take people to Emerson who live in other towns.
That
I do not believe it's a generally available service here.
there's definitely some criteria. You're right. I don't know what they are though.
Having done the research for the how to get around Concord thing that we did last year, it does come to Concord. I don't know how many people use it, but we are technically an MBTA community, and so we are served by the Ride.
Okay.
There's very specific criteria for using it. And we do have the Council on Aging vans, which I think serve many of people.
Right. Absolutely good.
Hey, Laura, just grammatically, could you, I'm thinking this, how often have you used?
That's better.
Yeah,
Okay.
Great.
So
Excellent.
21. We in 21 now?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
um,
I do want to acknowledge that we are beyond our 60 minutes here. Can we stay on for 50? I'm going to say we're going to need to stay on for another 30 minutes to finish
It's
this.
120 minutes, not 60 minutes.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I'm kind of losing it. I'm sorry.
Let's move really
Yeah.
quickly through these last pieces.
All right.
Any high level feedback on 21?
Yes,
Gonna-
it doesn't deal with the issue that we don't have any significant thing like a general bus service in Concord. It just
How about
asks, do you want, are the ones we have, adequate? That's basically what it is. It doesn't deal with the absence of something that would be useful.
Well, no, I mean, it's asking about buses when you get down to the options. A bus connecting different commercial areas in Concord, a bus between neighborhoods.
We're
It's
talking
offering-
about two different questions here. 21 asks about existing public transit services. Why don't you use what we already have?
Okay,
And then the second one asks you what would encourage you to take public transit, which is a different set of questions, including a number of options for a local service.
okay, good. Okay,
I would say these are fine. I don't care
Okay.
that much about any of them. I mean, I care about, I don't think that we need, I don't know. Do anybody feel like we need to dig into these more than that?
No.
Okay.
If anything, there's too many choices. I think we're gonna have to give everybody who takes this thing a $25 gift certificate.
Honestly, I would be interested in this being an open-ended question. What would encourage, what or something more open-ended, what kind of public, if Concord were to establish a public transit service, what would be useful to you is basically what I want to know.
In an ideal world.
now
I think
this is one case where I think putting in the bus service explicitly is important, since it's something we don't have. And it's not going to be in people's minds since they know we don't have it.
I would maybe just simplify it to a local bus service.
Right, something like that.
Well, might I suggest something? I in the notes that I sent, as one little piece of public transportation, I suggested something like a public shuttle service running between West Concord Center, Emerson, Hospital Thoreau Depot, and Monument Square Concord Center would be beneficial. Strongly agree somewhat, disagree, don't know, or no opinion. And then a question, what other stops should such a service connect? Please specify, not sure or no opinion. In other words, to just kind of grab a hold of it and sort of say, even would those stops be something quite a few people would think are beneficial or not?
I love those questions. My question is, Stantec in their presentation last week said that phase 2 of public engagement was to present ideas like that for the public to comment on, different transportation solutions. And right now, my question is, would people even ride a bus if there was a bus? People have, I know many of us would, but many people have preconceived notions about buses. It would be interested to know if people who are older would ride buses, people would younger, we need some basic information. Then that's what the purpose of this survey is, getting basic information.
So so which question are we on now?
If you want basic information, then leave it very general and don't be specific about which neighborhoods. So just say a bus service, within Concord.
Would you use a bus service within Concord?
You had spoken about partnering with one of the other regional transport agencies, and would it make sense to have something that connects us with Acton or Bedford or Lexington?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I drive to Maynard and to Lexington and to Bedford, and for things that I could easily use the bus for. So those connections are important. There was something that was a comment when I went to one of the Council on Disabilities, Commission on Disabilities meeting, where someone made a comment that they can get into Boston, but they can't get to Acton or Maynard. And so some of it's worth putting in. If you make a general question about would you ride a bus within Concord, would you ride a bus if there was one to adjacent or nearby other towns? I mean, is yes or no fine enough grain for you, Laura, or not? Because that's a short, simple, sweet question. Would you use a bus or would you not? and some people would absolutely say no, and some people would absolutely say yes. Or you said you could put a maybe.
I actually love the idea of, we've asked about existing public transit services. The thing that we keep coming up, we're the experts in Concord in terms of what people are talking about. I would say we cut this whole question and we just say, rate your interest in a local or regional bus service from 1 to 5 or something like that.
There's some more on this in section 7 about getting into where you want trips to, neighborhood, crosstown, neighboring towns into the city, regional centers like Waltham or Burlington. We want to maybe pull that up a little higher.
Yeah.
Fix that with priority, maybe not 1 to 5, but 3 levels of priority or something. Don't know.
And it looks like that evaporated from the online version, so I don't know if somebody else nixed it.
Well, here's my question. Do we want to take this and move it up into our public transit section, or do we want to leave it where it is and know that it's coming later?
I think anyway, at the moment, my gut feeling is move it up, because the big headings help people digest questions, and priorities almost ought to be an open-ended thing, if you ask me. But what do people think?
Oh, Laura, do you want to flip to the online version and see how this has been edited since?
This is the more recent version.
Oh, the document is?
Yes,
just
but if
looking at
there's something in
Katrina's
here that you
comment.
like better, we should look at it.
Well, I'm just struggling with like how we're framing this, you know, is it cross town? Is it inter neighborhood? Is it inter commercial areas, and how those are framed?
I just do want to point out, like, this is a very difficult question to read.
Yeah.
Like, I think that simplifying is so important at this stage.
For one thing, and anyway, I think so. I mean, we could tweak this, but yeah, I think so. I mean, commuter rail is not within our purview. It's very important, and I really believe we need more frequent and reliable commuter rail service. But
we're going to have information about that from this question. We don't need it down here.
Right, I agree.
The question I think we're trying to ask here is, what new public transit do you want to see in Concord? Do you want it to be local, regional? And the question I have in my mind is, do we care about having people rank it or choose up, you know, that, do you know what I mean?
How much detail do we want? Well, you use, I think you spoke well when you said there are people who would use it and people who would never use it. I don't know if they know that themselves and if they would put
Right.
it in, but at least that would be valuable. And again, it's aspirational too.
How about we parallel structure here? How often would you use the following public transit services if they were established in Concord? We have the same, and then we'll have this list from down below. So it would look like this. How often would you use the following public transit services if they were, I don't know, created? I don't know how to wordsmith that at this time of night.
Offered.
What was that?
Offered, maybe.
Offered, yes. Bus service within Concord, bus service between, bus service to, bus service more. This would be more bus service. And we could just cut those options, honestly.
I think you should cut those, and maybe you can put to be logically bus service between Concord and West Concord should be at the top, because that's sort of the narrowest thing. It's just a single route, and then
the thing that people request the most.
Yeah, I mean, it's, does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Why not just,
Those are confusing, like between, within.
Yeah.
How do we?
why don't we leave it open-ended? Have people specify their preference.
So maybe what we could do is we could say, how often would you use a local bus service? We're getting a little bit into the ideal world here, because then they get to create whatever local bus service they want in their heads.
Yep.
Now, we did lose Nick. I want to make sure we haven't lost Phil here, because we may have lost him.
Well, we lost Nick. Phil is there.
Okay.
Would you put it? Would you then have a question that said with between points within Concord and then from Concord to neighboring towns, or would you not even be that clear?
Well, two choices is probably okay.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean,
Love it.
you know, there's a movie theater in Maynard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
intracity, intercity.
Yes. Okay.
Local, regional, intercity or something.
So
There's one
Are
in
we
Lexington too.
Are we recommending here that we just cut this whole question now?
Which one, 22?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in favor of cutting complicated things.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I'm just gonna off. Oh, yeah. Okay. Cut all of this and I'll clean that up later. Driving in Concord. Before we move on to this section, I do want to give, Ellen has already dropped off. I do want to give a moment for public comment because we said this meeting was going to end in an hour. So I do want to just, committee members can take a quick stretch break, and I'm just going to invite Andrea, if you have a public comment, you can share it now.
Oh, that's so nice. I'll be super quick. I'm on the Public Works Committee, but I'm just speaking as myself. So I was just trying to catch myself up on everything that you guys were doing for the study and with the collaboration with Stantec. One thing I would mention is I did try to go back in your meeting minutes just to sort of understand the genesis of this, but your meeting minutes aren't posted, but I know you guys approved them because I've gone back to look at some of your meetings. So maybe just check in with your staff person to make sure she's posting those on the town website. It's super helpful. And I won't ask you to answer any questions tonight other than I will come next Tuesday is your public meeting. I will definitely take the survey. I have to say your criticisms and critiques of the survey are so much more thoughtful than the survey itself. It gives me a little bit of pause as to what Stantec came up with. It's almost like they've never written a survey before, and having experience in my past career with a lot of healthcare surveys, I know all the work that goes into making sure you are finding out the information you need in a succinct manner that gets the most participation from the people you're trying to reach. And I'm not sure this survey will do it, but not for lack of effort on your guys' part. You're doing so much work here. So that's all I'll say, other than Public Works is meeting tomorrow at 4. We do a hybrid meeting, so public can zoom in. If you didn't have a chance to attend, you might want to just check out the recording of it because we are going over budgetary issues, which might be some interesting details in there for you guys as you begin to form a report to share with everyone else about where you want to focus. Because I think the constraining thing is usually the budget, and it's always helpful to know those details. And that's all I'll say. Thank you so much.
Great comments.
Thank you so much. Those were awesome comments. And if anybody has Ellen Quackenbush's number, you can tell her to come back and I'll let her talk. All right. So we are diving back into driving in Concord. How do we want to deal with these first two? Are we happy? Do we feel like we've cut safety from the last one, so the parallel construction is less important? I think we could maybe cut this unless we feel like this is important information for us to have. And Steve, I'd actually be really interested in your input on whether you feel like we need to know how people feel safely in Concord driving. If they, oh my God, you can tell that I'm late.
Well, we get complaints every day about everything, including safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. But I think understanding safety in general when it comes to driving is important because everybody drives, roads are available throughout. And so it will matter much to have answers. What is this as general as it sounds, but I think it's worth keeping something like that.
All right. Go ahead, Marianne.
I like keeping it too, because I think, a huge thing that we're discussing here is road sharing, and road sharing is hazardous to cars as well as pedestrians and cyclists. And just in the context of, hey, like some of the roads aren't wide enough for all the users to share them. Is, I think like Monument Street comes to mind. I think it's worth keeping.
Any other?
Even though I just was like, I'm driving, of course I'm safe, but yeah. And
I'm-
Route 2.
I'm happy keeping it. I actually have a different reason for keeping it, which is I do think that I don't know how to ask it. This is a polite way of asking some of our most elderly members of the community whether they feel safe driving in Concord. It's hard to come out and ask somebody like, "Are you a safe driver?" But like maybe this kind of gets at it a little bit.
A lot of folks might rather not be driving.
For a minute, what, which question are we on?
How safe do you feel driving in Concord?
I mean, it's a decent generic question. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors.
All right, let's
You
keep
know,
going then.
I noticed there was something about bicycle education. I think we need driver education.
All right, moving on. Those are pretty simple. How likely would you be to drive less if there were other transportation options available? Our Stantec recommends removing it because it's vague. How do others feel about it?
I don't think it's vague.
I think it's a good question. I don't know if it's worth trying to tweak it, but it's I think it's a good question.
I think it's one of the more,
basically.
yeah, it's one of the better crafted questions.
I think I'm on the board with that. We really like this question, I think is my
Yeah.
response to this.
Yeah, we really like it.
All right. How long? Oh, so here's a question before we get into specifics. Do we want to ask about parking? We're doing a separate parking study. We could just cut these for length.
Yeah.
Because it also opens the door to like all sorts of complaints that aren't really relevant to what we're trying to focus on here.
You know, Laura, given that we're gonna winnow this down to roughly 3 questions about driving, and driving is the predominant mode of transport in town, could I suggest that we put that at the top of the list? Move the whole driving section prior to walking and biking and.
I think well, there is a consistency throughout sort of like talking about transportation systems. Like there's a hierarchy of design, and following that hierarchy throughout this planning process, I think would be valuable. You talk about like walking, biking, public transit, personal vehicles as sort of like the upside down V of, what Envision Concord states and also what most transportation active, folks are trying to accomplish in terms of design choices. But it's also a relief. You get down here and you're like, okay, there's only 3 questions.
I don't know if people are gonna get down there.
It's a problem. Well, by the way, I think that 26 rather, is probably the most important question in the whole survey. If multimodal transportation is what we're interested in. And, I agree with Dan. It might make sense to put driving further forward in things because it's common. On the other hand, there's the safety. Going back, scroll up again a little bit. I don't think the safe question matters so much as the how likely would you drive less if other options were available in terms of tweaking people's mind. How often do you drive? Would you drive less? Or would you drive less if there were other options available? I think that should follow. So 26 should come after 24. And I don't know whether 25 is really needed or not, but it's fine to put it in. But I really think if you're talking about
Are you talking the right numbers? I think
I'm talking
25
about
was
what's on the screen.
25 was the one you liked.
How safe do you feel
Oh, no.
driving in Concord?
No,
that's
what I'm saying is 24, how often do you typically drive? And then the next one I would say, how likely would you be to drive less if there were other transportation options
Okay.
available? And then, you can ask about safety if you want, but
Steve feels it's very important.
which
I would-
how
let's-
safe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Steve made a good point, I think, for keeping that in.
Oh, I'm not saying take it out, but I guess what I'm saying is that maybe it could be, if it's put in third place, then you could have a fourth question that would dig a little deeper into that. In terms of other, is it other drivers? Is it, what is this? That isn't just infrastructure. You're interacting with a lot of other drivers and other
How about,
modes.
for time's sake, I'm going to try to sum this up and say yes or no. How do we feel about swapping these two questions? How safe do you feel driving? Cutting the questions about parking and recommending that they come up with another question that helps them elaborate on how safe do you feel driving?
Perfect.
Okay. The other option for closing this section, I think, is an open-ended question. This is a great opportunity. They've come to the end of all the sections. They've just answered the question, how likely would you be to drive less if there were other transportation options? We could have a great open-ended question here about, how do you feel about driving? I don't know what it is. But we could leave it to Stantec to say they could think about ending on an open-ended question.
I sort of like that because it maybe invites people to inquire, or maybe invites them to participate as part of a public process. So the safety thing, it strikes me that it's important to at least mention speed limits and aggressive driving in that somehow. I'm not really, it's almost 10 o'clock and I'm really losing it, but we'll let Stantec take a crack at it. Because in talking with people, those are some of the more common comments that I've had about people's driving habits.
With what Phil just said, I mean, not to say that it's the right way to do it, but I was suggesting reducing the speed of automobiles or other roadway users is a useful way to increase safety. Agree strongly, disagree, etc. I mean, speed and aggressive driving, the question to elaborate should definitely include speed and aggressive driving, and not just, whether the stop signs are in the right place.
How about we just suggest an open-ended question for time's sake? We are so over time.
That is fine.
We could add, so we will say, you could add a question allowing them to elaborate on their perception of safety. This could be open-ended. All right.
Yeah, or can you just add to it, or specific dangers that they see?
Okay. All right. So
Hey, Laura,
it is 10 o'clock.
Ellen's going to try and get back in. I told her she can comment.
Okay,
So,
great. It is late. We're not going to wordsmith any of these. I'm going to cut you off if you try to wordsmith it. I just kind of want to say tacit agreement, tacit disagreement. And if you have specific wordsmithing things, you're going to send them in separately for the last two sections because we are so over time. And Steve has to go. Steve, I actually invite you to leave if you really would like to leave at this point. And I'm also going to invite Ellen to give her public comment as soon as she connects.
I think she just did.
Okay, great.
So I'm sorry I missed the last bit. I had to go off and do something.
Understandable. We are an hour and a half over time.
I get that. I would say that the most important part of this survey to me is the public transit, and the whole point is that we don't have any good options now. And so to the idea of having I don't know where you ended, but trips within Concord or West Concord is great. I think one of the things that might be considered is where's the Council on Aging ban go? And when I last checked, it goes to Crosby's, Trader Joe's, Market Basket. So, I mean, I think about mass transit and I think about, all the stuff I couldn't carry in my backpack, I couldn't put on my bike when I want to go to Crosby's or Goodwill. So I think mass transit for transportation specific errands, going to Emerson, going to Baker Ave, going to across Route 2 to the doctors and services across Route 2 is really, really important. So I think mass transit, it doesn't matter that we don't have it. I think if the survey doesn't give people an opportunity to explain what they're using it for, and it obviously won't be for recreation, it'll be to get someplace specific. I think that would be extremely useful. We have a hop on, hop off trolley in terms of the pilot, and I wouldn't say discontinued because that I don't think anybody's gonna, check that if you say discontinued. You might not really say, did you use that when there was the pilot last year when it did go to West Concord along with a lot of the tourist destinations? I mean, Boston has a hop on, hop off trolley, and I think that would serve a lot along with things like the Roadrunner service in Acton, which I think people were talking about. So my own pitch is, doesn't matter we don't have mass transit, I think we should be adding it because I think that provides a tremendous service when people can't carry or put on their bicycles because they don't have the baskets or don't know how to use them, the stuff they want to take to the destination they're going. That's my comment.
Thank you, Ellen. That was a great comment. All right. So at this point in the evening, I think that I want to get some agreement. We need all of us to stay on if we're going to finish this. But I think we need to decide if we're going to stay on any longer. It is 10. Mark is a yes. Phil is a no.
I'll stay.
Mariana, you have little ones. You're a yes. Phil, can we persuade you to stay?
Do you need me for a quorum?
Yeah.
Yes, we need you for the quorum.
We'll give you a $25 gift certificate.
We'll give you $25.
Yeah, we'll chip in if that's legal. First of all, I think some of these can be chopped.
Let's set a 15-minute time limit.
Yeah, set a 15-minute time limit and just go bang, bang, bang.
Okay. All right. So chop or keep?
Which one?
First one, 30.
Stop.
I'm gonna make it bigger for you.
It's a little specific. But
Yeah,
the map stuff should probably take care of this or other things.
Right, like I want to keep it, and I think this is one of the ones where people get their. Oh, sorry, we're not just. I don't know.
Mariana split. Marcus chop.
I'm neutral.
I'd like to put pins on the map, though.
There will be pins.
And chop it.
I think it's vague, near parks, near schools. I mean, I don't know.
Like which parks, which schools.
Yeah, so let's chop it and rely
What
on the pins and
transportation
the outreach.
improvements.
Great. All right, chop, this is vague. Trip type. So we've moved this to the section above. This
Okay.
has been moved. If more public transportation were available, how much would you be willing to pay for a one-way ride?
This is way premature, if you ask me.
I agree
Other
with Mark.
thoughts?
I agree with
Price
Mark.
ranges are stupid.
This seems premature.
Yeah.
Mode. Please select the top 2 modes in Concord that you would like to see prioritized through infrastructure improvements. I added this as I was going through spending. That's the biggest thing. Spending, policies, etc.
Like why to maybe like rank some or like check. I don't know. You don't want to have people check all, but
Yeah, my question is why too, but
Yeah,
I
sorry.
agree with ranking or.
Yeah, this is a kind of a hard question though, without context, because it doesn't really give you a sense of how much it costs to build a mile of roadway versus a mile of sidewalk versus a mile of bike trail. I think that piece of information would be, or to run a public transit system. I think that would be helpful for people to have so that they can make some kind of rational decision. Otherwise, it's just sort of a popularity contest.
It may not really, it sounds useful on the surface, but it may not really be useful because we're getting some of this from the other questions
Yeah.
with more rich context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's also, there's lots of other stuff that goes into it, like, public subsidies and how Chapter 90 works versus having to pay for it out of the tax base and blah, blah, blah. So,
yeah, somebody's question, follow-up question be, what does it cost, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could, just to bring us to conclusion, we could suggest that this whole section get cut. This is a priority section. We're trying to get at people's priorities. We haven't asked them to rank the different modes. But we could just ask them to cut this whole section because it is vague and it's like the other sections are concrete.
Yeah, they already told us whether or not they'd be likely to use the other methods. So if it's like, sure, I said yes to 2 of them, but I don't know, chop.
All right. So I am going to say, we are in agreement that this section is not very useful, specific, or actionable. We would recommend cutting it for length. Everybody agree with that statement?
Yes, perfect.
And for that last question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna
The
say
most important part.
we like this question a lot. It
And to
stay,
clarify,
yeah.
We're going to do another public meeting later on once they've presented some options and then have the public comment on those later.
Yes.
Cool. I mean, that'll be a good time to get people's priority preferences.
So do you need Laura to say kill the whole section except for 34? Or is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Demographics, this should be very simple. What street do you live on? In which town? I think that this should be changed to what is the closest cross street to your home? Or what is your address or the closest cross street? We're trying to get at geographic data so we don't get like all people from one neighborhood.
Those 3 questions could be smushed into one. Where do you live and work, kind of. Yeah, I think the cross streets is good because people don't want to, reveal their identity.
Right. Nearest. So
home or work.
So what you mean is what's the nearest intersection to your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
How about if you live in Concord, what is the nearest intersection to your home? And then you have the exact same question that says, if you work, you say workplace.
Yeah, we can try it.
Yep.
Are we having age?
I think that last one was meant to be like if you commute, where are you going? But I don't know if that matters here. Like if you live in Concord and work somewhere else, where are you commuting to?
Mm-hmm.
That might be too much information for this.
Yeah, I don't think it's a priority.
Yeah.
If they're not in Concord.
Mm-hmm.
Someone made a good point about breaking out the 80+ category.
Yeah.
There's a really big difference between 65+ and 85+.
I hope so.
Do we agree about this? We agree about this, right? It's just the 65.
Yeah, 70's the new 50, Phil.
Thank you.
But 80's still 80.
All right. These are very standard. This is a very standard question on all the surveys I did. And then this was simplified by household income category. I know that Nick had a thought about this. I'm thought maybe please identify which category represents your total household income before taxes. And then we could say include sources if we felt like all of that was necessary, because I know that that was something that Nick was saying in our last meeting.
It's too much, just people can interpret it how they want and it doesn't matter that much.
I think we don't need that precision. I know what Nick's talking about, but
Okay, let's leave it alone then. And then there's a map. We've all done those maps before, so that you can, here's the thing. You can take a look at the map on your own time and send any comments that you have to Aaron and Steve. Additionally, if you have more comments than what we were able to cover tonight, you can send them to Aaron and Steve.
So is the map somewhere else, or
Yeah,
is it embedded in the document?
it wasn't in the online form that I was.
Yes, it you know, I have to make sure that Aaron posts it to the public website as well. It was in the email that I sent to you with the meeting materials for tonight.
So it's separate from the survey.
It was in that email that I sent with the survey, and it says the online input mat is available to test out here. I will just very briefly show it so that it's been shown on this meeting. I'll share my screen. This is, but it's very similar to how the MBTA communities one works, where you could put in a primary destination, you could put in unsafe transportation infrastructure.
That's a link in the
ideas
in
and
your
suggestions.
email somewhere.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that before we go? All right.
It's good looking map.
So we are at the end of a very, very long meeting. I do want to say I am sincerely grateful for the time and attention everybody put into this. This was huge. I will clean up the document that we worked on tonight. I will send it to Aaron and Steve and Stantec. I will make sure it's posted publicly so the public can review it as well. And you know, I think that we're asking for a lot of information here. I am concerned about survey participation. I think we will need to have a follow-up conversation about how we can drive up participation in a survey that is long and complicated. And I think that because we want so much information out of it, it will be incumbent upon us to help make sure that that happens. Mark, go ahead.
Just wanted to mention, I was telling before the meeting, I was present at the beginning of the select board meeting in the public comment section. At the beginning of the 6 p.m. select board meeting, I announced that there will be the session for public input drop-in at Harvey Wheeler on the 17th.
Yes. In terms of publicizing the public meeting, please tell everybody that you know, tell your neighbors. I will also say that I walked around town on Saturday. I walked into not every business, but a very significant portion of most of the businesses in both downtown Concord Center and West Concord, and told employees and business owners about it. So I invite others to do similar and the same.
I did a little in the Concord Center.
And if anybody wants posters, I have some. Aaron has more. Go ahead, Mariana.
Final question was, did we decide to take out the enter your email address for the gift card thing out of anonymity concerns, or is that staying in? I know there were some objections to that.
We did not make the
It's
decision.
optional. It's optional and it's still in, I think.
Right.
It is optional. Yeah. I think building lists of people who are interested in this is not a bad idea. So I'm happy to have them so we can invite them to.
It's a great way to follow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So any other questions or comments? We will be meeting again on October 17th. The thing starts at 6:30. I would recommend that we come a little earlier, 6:15 or 6 o'clock. I can follow up by email on scheduling.
If
Oh, if we have a quorum, it has to be public. Okay,
Yeah,
so we all have to
well,
come at 6 and we'll
yeah.
just jump right in.
Whatever you. So what time are we showing up?
6.
6:30, sorry.
6:30,
I'll
okay.
see you at 6:30 on the 7th.
We just keep muzzled before 6:30.
Don't vote on anything.
This is posted, right, as a,
Yes, it is a posted meeting. Well, we're going to do this by email. I have a question about whether we could come 15 minutes early so Stantec could just explain how the room is laid out. So maybe we could just post it as a public meeting, but we can get to that when we get there. Let's just say 6:30 on the 17th. Any further questions? And then I would entertain a motion to
I'll
close
move
this
to
meeting.
adjourn.
Move to adjourn it.
back
Second.
then,
All right, Phil,
aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Mariana, Dan.
Yes, yes.
Oh my God.
Steve,
And I'm an
thank
aye
you
as
so
well.
much for sticking around for all of this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Steve.
No problems. I enjoyed the all the conversations.
All right.
Good night, everybody.